We are in part 5 of our series as we're going through the Nicene Creed. And as I mentioned, the Council of Nicaea was in 325 AD, and that's where the Nicene Creed was formulated. But it's very important to know that much later, in 381 AD, it was tweaked even further, and people saw the issues that had arisen because they weren't tight enough in their language in the first creed. And this is one of the reasons creeds are so important, because there's a lot of theology you can't just do in an afternoon in the library. It takes decades, sometimes centuries, of formulating theology in a particular way until someone comes up with a heresy that kind of sneaks through, and the heresy still works even though your creed seemed fine. So you actually have to expand your creed a little. You have to make it tighter and more specific language. And so we see that example in the First Council of Constantinople in 381, which is the kind of the second Nicene Creed ratification. And in the language there, so we read before, we believe in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, and of all things seen and unseen, and in one Lord Jesus Christ, the only Son of God. Now, that's how we read it before, but the tighter way to say it is the only begotten Son of God, begotten of the Father, before the worlds, before all worlds, light of light, very God of very God, begotten, not made, consubstantial with the Father, by whom all things were made. And so there's a lot in there. Let's unpack a little bit by bit. We've said that there was one Lord Jesus Christ, and that he is the Son of God, that he has the very nature of God. Well, the Creed specifically says he's the only begotten of the Father, begotten of the Father before all worlds. So he was not a product of creation. He was already there beforehand. And you can see them piling the language on to make sure you understand that Jesus, the Son, and God the Father have the same substance. And so it says light of light, very God of very God. Now, that light of light structure, the of means that one comes from the other. So this is now talking about the concept of eternal generation, that the Son comes from the Father. That's true. In their relationship, there's one is the source of the other, but that didn't have a moment in time where it started. Just like you can think of a star and its light. You know, as long as there's a star, it has light, but everybody understands the light comes from the star. In the same way, God the Father is the source of the Son, and yet God the Father only exists as the Father because he has a Son. So God is not primarily a creator. God is not primarily a king, because he didn't always have something to reign over, and there was no creation. But he has always been a father, which means he has always had a son. So that's what they're trying to get at there, that Jesus is the light that comes from light, and he is very God that comes from very God. It's stressing the fact that they have the same nature, exactly the same nature. And then the phrase begotten, that's a word we don't really use much in English today. You know, you can say bad traffic gridlock begets stress. You know, it means to produce. It does not mean to be born. I mean, that's one of its meanings, but that's not the primary meaning, and certainly not the way it's meant here, that Jesus was not born in a time, but that it was the Father that begot him. And so he was not made. That's what the Creed says. Very God of very God, begotten, not made. And it's important to have that phrase in there, not made. He's not created. So yes, he gets his source from the Father, but not as a creation. As light comes from light. As very God comes from very God. And then the final phrase, consubstantial with the Father. That's another word we don't use a lot as we're tweeting or whatever, but consubstantiate means substance. You hear the word substance in there, substantial, and con means with, or of the same substance. So the Father and the Son are of the same substance. Whatever makes God who he is, God the Father, is the same thing that makes God the Son who he is. Divinity, deity, very God of very God. And so they have the same nature. So it's not like there's a divine nature in God the Father and that he creates a being and then infuses some sort of power or nature into it. Like, no, they are of the same nature. Anytime you use analogies, they're going to fall short. But in my mind, I kind of think of it as, if you have a lump of clay and you take a piece out of it, they're still the same substance. They're the same clay, even though they are distinct from one another now, the two lumps are, but they are made of the same substance. And also, to carry that little illustration a bit further, the one lump is taken out of the other. The difference, of course, is that has been happening for eternity past. The Son has been eternally generated without a beginning for that generation. And then it goes on to say, by whom all things were made. All things were made by Jesus. He is the creator himself. All things were created through him and for him and unto him, but also by him. And nothing was made without him being involved. And so that is swimming in the deep end for today, and we will pick it up again next week.